When legendary human general Henry Bailey finally opened his eyes after 2 centuries of cryo sleep, the merciless alien overlords called Vulcans were mere hours away from total annihilation of the human species. The last thing Bailey remembered before being forcibly shoved into the cryopod was the desperate faces of his crew, sacrificing everything to keep him hidden as a final hope for humanity's survival. Now, as he stumbled out of the pod, muscles atrophied and mind sluggish, the ship's AI greeted him with a grim status report. "Welcome back, General," the AI said. "I'm afraid things have changed quite drastically in your absence. The war, we lost. Vulcans conquered Earth and the colonies 173 years ago. Only a few ragtag human insurgencies remain, scattered and in hiding. The enemy has us outgunned, outnumbered, and backed into a corner." Bailey's heart sank as the AI continued. "Vulcan forces are superior in every way. They've locked down all strategic systems and have standing orders to exterminate any human resistance without mercy. Our location is secure for now, but they'll detect this ship powering up soon enough." The general stood silent for a moment, the weight of humanity's fate pressing upon him, before speaking. "What are our assets?" "Just this ship and whatever supplies and armaments she still carries," the AI replied. "And yourself, of course, humanity's greatest strategic mind. Our one ace in the hole. I've had 2 centuries to analyze Vulcan movements and communications. I believe a military genius like yourself can find exploitable weaknesses in their forces and infrastructure. It's a near impossible task. But there may still be a chance, as slim as it is, to turn the tables. The survival of the human race rests on your shoulders now, General. You're our last hope." Bailey took a deep breath, steadying himself. He never expected to wake up to a lost war with humanity enslaved, their enemy holding all the cards. The odds were overwhelmingly stacked against him, but he had a ship, the AI's centuries of intel, and his own brilliant tactical mind. It would have to be enough. For if Henry Bailey couldn't find a way to defeat the Vulcan Empire and free humanity from alien rule in the coming hours, then mankind would be doomed to extinction. This was 0 hour. He cracked his knuckles, the fire of determination alighting in his eyes, and said, "All right then, let's get to work. We've got a species to save." Bailey moved fast, the clock ticking down. He pulled up star maps and intel reports, his strategic mind whirring. There, a human resistance cell on the remote colony of Zephyrus. It was a long shot, but he had to start somewhere. The shuttle shuddered as it dropped out of FTL in Zephyrus's orbit. Bailey guided it down through the thin atmosphere to the coordinates the ship AI provided. The landing was rough on the rocky outcropping, but he didn't have time for finesse. The rebel hideout was well concealed, but Bailey's trained eye picked out the sentries. He raised his hands as he approached the camouflaged entrance. "I'm General Henry Bailey. I'm here to help." Tense murmurs rippled through the gathered rebels, disbelief and wary hope warring on their dirty faces. The crowd parted as a grizzled, scarred man stepped forward, rifle in hand. "Bailey, huh?" he said. "Awful convenient timing. How do we know this isn't a Vulcan trick?" Bailey met his eyes. "You're Jack Richards, leader of Zephyrus Resistance Cell Omega-5. Your wife and daughter were killed in the Vulcan attack on New Horizon." Gasps and mutters rose from the crowd at his words. "I know because I led the counterattack. We saved 314 civilians that day." "Not enough." He held Richards's gaze. "I'm sorry I wasn't there to save them too." Before Richards could reply, warning klaxons blared. "Incoming hostiles!" a woman shouted, monitoring the sensors. "Vulcan assault craft, closing fast." The base erupted into frantic activity. "Defensive positions!" Richards barked. "Gunners, get those AA turrets spun up!" But Bailey was already moving, grabbing a rifle and spare power packs. "Richards, I need 3 men on the North Ridge. Bottleneck their dropships there. Get snipers in the towers and demo charges in the gully to the east. Shut down that drone control transmitter before they get eyes on us." To Richards's surprise, the rebels obeyed the general unquestioningly. As the Vulcan ships screamed in, the humans were ready. The dropships flew into a firestorm of concentrated rifle and turret fire, their hulls sparking and deforming. Demo charges cratered the ground, destroying 2 transports in balls of fire. In minutes, the attacking force lay in smoking ruins. As the echoes faded, Richards turned to Bailey, amazement and respect in his eyes. "I guess the stories about you were true," he said. "Hell of a thing, seeing the butcher of Beetlejuice in action." He clasped Bailey's hand firmly. "The Zephyrus cell is at your command, General. What's our play?" Bailey clasped his hand in return, then brought up a holomap. "The Vulcans control the core worlds, but their grip is weaker out here on the rim." Points of light sprung up, tracking trade routes and fleet movements. "Hit their supply lines. Stir up the local populations. We can make them overextend, divert ships and troops to dozens of brushfire revolts." "Death by 1,000 cuts," Richards mused. "Bleed them slowly." Bailey nodded. In the days that followed, secure comms were established with the Cryo ship's AI and tentative contact made with other rebel groups. Bailey and Richards worked tirelessly, masterminding surgical raids and strikes. But their advantage was short-lived. On a recon mission to a neighboring system, Bailey's shuttle was forced to flee from a Vulcan warship lying in ambush. Warning shots sizzled past the shuttle's canopy as they jumped to FTL in the nick of time. "They know I'm back," Bailey said grimly as they caught their breath. "The Vulcans will be coming for us now, with everything they've got." "Then we take the fight to them first," Richards replied fiercely. "It's all or nothing now. Humanity's freedom or extinction." Bailey brought up the holomap of Vulcan targets, face hardened. There would be no more holding back, no more half measures. The Vulcans had sounded the death knell for their own empire the moment they made an enemy of Henry Bailey. Bailey stood in the dimly lit command center, his eyes scanning the holographic displays. Vulcan ships were closing in fast. They had mere hours left. "Richards!" Bailey called out, his voice steady despite the tension. "I need you to take a team and hit the Vulcan comm hub. We need that transmitter." Jack Richards nodded grimly. "Consider it done, General. What's the play?" Bailey outlined the plan rapidly, pointing out key defensive positions and approach vectors on the holomap. As Richards assembled his strike team, Bailey turned to the remaining rebels. "The rest of you, with me, we're going to give our Vulcan friends something to think about." The rebels moved out under cover of darkness. Richard's team slipped away towards the comm hub while Bailey led the main force towards a nearby Vulcan military base. Plasma fire lit up the night as Bailey's force engaged the Vulcan defenders. The general barked orders, directing his troops with precision. A Vulcan battlecruiser loomed overhead, its weapons powering up. "Choke point Alpha, now!" Bailey shouted. On cue, hidden rebel gunners opened up, their concentrated fire overwhelming the cruiser's shields. The massive ship listed, crashing into the base's power generators in a spectacular explosion. Meanwhile, Richards and his team fought their way through the comm hub's defenses. Alarms blared as they pushed deeper into the facility. "Control room dead ahead," Richards called out. "Crews, hack that door." The door slid open and Richards' team poured in, catching the Vulcan technicians by surprise. In moments, the hub was theirs. "We're in, General," Richards reported over the comm. "Ready when you are." Bailey's voice came through, tinged with static from the ongoing battle. "Patching in now. All units, fall back to extraction points." The general's face appeared on screens across the galaxy as he began to speak. "People of Earth and her colonies, this is General Henry Bailey. For 2 centuries I slept while our worlds burned. No more. The time has come to cast off the chains of Vulcan oppression. Rise up. Take back what is ours." As Bailey's words spread, their effect was electric. On a dozen worlds, humans who had lived in fear for generations found new courage. Rebel cells sprang into action, striking Vulcan targets with coordination and fury. On Earth itself, emboldened rebels launched a daring raid on the heart of Vulcan power, the palace of the Vulcan overlord Solaris. In the ensuing chaos, vital intelligence was seized and rushed to Bailey. The general pored over the stolen data, a plan forming. "There," he said, pointing to a star map. "That's our shot. The Rigel Corridor. It's a choke point for half the Vulcan fleet." Bailey gathered what rebel ships he could, a ragtag assemblage of fighters and retrofitted freighters. They lay in wait at the corridor's edge. When the Vulcan fleet emerged from hyperspace, they found themselves in a kill box. Mines detonated in blinding flashes, ripping apart ship after ship. The rebels struck hard and fast, their unorthodox tactics leaving the Vulcans reeling. As the last Vulcan cruiser fell silent, cheers erupted across the rebel fleet. But Bailey knew this was only the beginning. "All ships, scatter to fallback positions," he ordered, "and put me on broadcast one last time." Bailey's face appeared on screens throughout human space. "Today, we struck a blow for freedom, but our fight is far from finished. The road ahead will be hard, but know this: humanity will never again kneel before alien overlords. The rebellion has begun." As the rebel fleet dispersed, Bailey turned his attention to the mountain of work ahead. He had disparate rebel groups to unify, strategies to formulate, and a vast alien empire to overthrow. The general's eyes gleamed with fierce willpower as he dove into the intel, searching for the next crack in the Vulcan defenses. The odds were still stacked against them, but for the first time in centuries, humanity had hope. As the echoes of victory faded, Bailey stood on the bridge of his flagship, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Vulcan fleet at Rigel lay in ruins, but this was just the beginning. "General, we're picking up massive subspace distortions," a comms officer reported. "Vulcan reinforcements. They're converging on Earth from all sectors." Bailey's heart made. Solaris isn't wasting any time. He means to crush us before we can consolidate. He keyed the fleet-wide comm. "This is General Bailey to all rebel forces. Our victory at Rigel was hard-won, but the real fight's just starting. Solaris is coming for Earth with everything he's got. I'm calling on every human ship, every resistance cell. If you can fly, if you can fight, we need you. Rendezvous at these coordinates. It's time to take back our home." Over the next weeks, ships poured in from across human space, everything from sleek corvettes to patchwork freighters with guns bolted on. Bailey worked tirelessly, coordinating this ragtag armada into a cohesive fighting force. In the war room of an asteroid base, he addressed the assembled rebel captains. "Each of your groups has unique strengths. Zephyrus Cell, your gunships will form our screening elements. New Mars Resistance, your stealth corvettes, will be our eyes and ears. Earth Underground, your knowledge of the home system is invaluable. You'll be our pathfinders." As the captains dispersed to brief their crews, an intelligence officer burst in. "General, we've cracked their encryption. Solaris himself is leading the attack fleet." A predatory grin spread across Bailey's face. "That arrogant bastard. He's handed us the key to victory." He outlined his audacious plan to the stunned officers. When the Vulcan armada arrived, they found the skies above Earth empty. Solaris's flagship pushed ahead, sensors probing for the rebels. Suddenly, Bailey's fleet dropped out of warp, catching the Vulcans in a brutal crossfire. "Now!" Bailey barked. A swarm of rebel assault craft slipped through the chaos, latching onto Solaris's ship. Bailey materialized in its corridors with a strike team, cutting through Vulcan defenders. They breached the bridge to find Solaris waiting, energy blade ignited. "I should have killed you centuries ago, human," the Vulcan sneered. Bailey ducked under a vicious slash, rolling to his feet. "Better late than never," he growled, tackling Solaris. They grappled fiercely until Bailey slammed the Vulcan leader to the deck, weapon at his throat. "Surrender. It's over." With Solaris captured, the rebel fleet pressed their advantage. Bailey's voice crackled over the comms. "All ships, execute Battle Plan Omega." Rebel squadrons danced through the Vulcan formation, isolating and annihilating entire battle groups. Pockets of Vulcans fought on, but as word spread of Solaris's capture, more and more enemy ships fled or surrendered. Bailey forced the defeated Vulcan leader to broadcast the surrender order, ending 2 centuries of oppression. On Earth's surface, humans emerged from hiding to see Vulcan ships retreating. Cheers erupted in the rubble-strewn streets as Bailey's image appeared on view screens. "My fellow humans," he began, "today marks the dawn of a new era. We are free." Thunderous applause drowned out his next words. When it subsided, he continued, "The road ahead won't be easy. We have a civilization to rebuild, but we've proven that nothing is impossible when humanity stands united." As the new chancellor of a liberated Earth, Bailey surveyed the mammoth task before him. Rebuilding infrastructure, re-establishing governance, healing the scars left by generations of alien rule. But for the first time in centuries, humanity's future lay in its own hands. Chancellor Henry Bailey stood at the podium, his weathered face illuminated by the harsh glare of spotlights. The cavernous assembly hall buzzed with anticipation as representatives from across human space gathered for this historic moment. "My fellow humans," Bailey began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, "today marks the dawn of a new era. The chains of Vulcan oppression have been broken, but our work has only just begun." As he spoke, Bailey's eyes swept across the crowd. He saw the hope shining in their faces, but also the weariness etched into every line. These were people who had known nothing but struggle and hardship for generations. "Our first task is to help our brave fighters find their place in this new world," Bailey continued. "To that end, I am establishing the Veteran Reintegration Initiative." In the days that followed, Bailey threw himself into the work of rebuilding. He pored over reports late into the night, the flickering holoscreens casting a ghostly glow over his features. The challenges seemed insurmountable at times. One afternoon, Bailey visited a newly established retraining center. The facility hummed with activity as former rebels learned trades ranging from engineering to agriculture. In one corner, a grizzled fighter awkwardly manipulated virtual controls, learning to operate terraforming equipment. "How's it going, soldier?" Bailey asked, placing a hand on the man's shoulder. The veteran's eyes were haunted as he turned to face his former commander. "It's different, sir. I've spent so long fighting, I'm not sure I know how to do anything else." Bailey nodded, understanding all too well. "It will take time, but we'll get there. Your skills and courage are still needed. We're just changing the battlefield." As he left the center, Bailey received an urgent communication. Unrest was spreading on the colony world of New Centauri. Local factions were vying for control in the power vacuum left by the Vulcans' retreat. Bailey convened an emergency meeting of his advisors. "We can't let this spiral out of control," he insisted. "If we lose even one world to chaos, others could follow." After hours of heated debate, a plan was formulated. Bailey would personally lead a diplomatic mission to New Centauri, backed by a show of military force to keep the peace if necessary. The journey to New Centauri gave Bailey time to reflect on the enormity of the task before him. As his ship dropped out of FTL on the outskirts of the system, he gazed at the blue-green world below. It looked so peaceful from orbit, a stark contrast to the turmoil on its surface. Bailey's shuttle touched down in New Centauri's capital, escorted by a squadron of fighters. As he stepped onto the landing pad, he could feel the tension in the air. Armed factions eyed each other warily across makeshift barricades. Over the next days, Bailey worked tirelessly to bring the rival groups to the negotiating table. He listened to grievances, made compromises, and occasionally had to resort to thinly veiled threats of intervention. "We didn't throw off one set of oppressors just to be ruled by another," Bailey reminded the faction leaders during a particularly heated session. "Either you learn to work together, or I'll be forced to step in. And none of us wants that." Slowly, painfully, progress was made. As Bailey prepared to depart New Centauri, a tentative peace agreement had been reached. It was fragile, but it was a start. Back on Earth, Bailey turned his attention to the monumental task of environmental restoration. He stood on a hill overlooking what had once been a lush valley, now a barren wasteland stretching to the horizon. "We did this," he murmured to himself, his hands clenching into fists. "We let them do this to our home." With grim purpose, Bailey threw himself into the restoration efforts. He authorized the construction of massive atmospheric scrubbers, their towering forms soon dotting the landscape. Teams of scientists worked around the clock, developing new techniques to purify contaminated soil and water. Progress was slow, but Bailey refused to be discouraged. Each day brought small victories, a patch of new growth here, cleaner air readings there. It would take decades, perhaps centuries, to fully heal the damage, but Bailey was determined to see it through. As he juggled the countless demands of rebuilding human civilization, Bailey received troubling reports from the outer colonies. Pro-Vulcan sentiment was growing in some quarters, fueled by collaborators who had profited under the old regime. Bailey knew he couldn't ignore this threat. Humanity's newfound freedom was too precious, too fragile to risk losing. He began to gather his old comrades, the battle-hardened leaders who had fought beside him to overthrow the Vulcans. "One last push," Bailey told them during a secure holoconference. "We need to root out these last vestiges of Vulcan influence before they can take hold." As plans were laid for this final campaign, Bailey couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. The work of rebuilding was nowhere near the end, but the fires of rebellion still burned within him. The galaxy's newest free society would require constant vigilance, and Bailey was ready to answer the call. Chancellor Bailey stood at the viewport of his office, gazing out at the bustling reconstruction efforts below. The scars of Vulcan occupation were slowly fading, but pockets of resistance remained. He turned as his aide entered. "Sir, we've received new intelligence reports. Pro-Vulcan collaborators are active on several outer worlds." Bailey's heart made. "We can't let this fester. Get me Jack Richards." Hours later, Richards strode into the war room. Bailey laid out the situation. "Jack, I need you to lead this operation. Root out these sympathizers, once and for all." Richards nodded, his eyes glinting with purpose. "I'll assemble my best team, sir. We'll get it done." Over the next days, Richards handpicked his strike force. Hardened veterans of the rebellion gathered in a converted hangar, their faces etched with the toll of years spent fighting the Vulcans. "Listen up," Richards addressed the assembled fighters. "We've got collaborators to smoke out. This won't be easy, but you all know the stakes. Humanity's future depends on stamping out Vulcan influence for good." The first target was Vega Prime. As their dropships screamed through the atmosphere, Richards briefed his team. "Intel says the local militia's backing the old Vulcan governor. We take them out, fast and clean." The urban battle raged for a week. Rebel forces pushed through narrow streets, trading fire with entrenched militia. Buildings crumbled under the onslaught. Finally, Richard's troops cornered the militia commander in the governor's compound. "It's over," Richards called out as his soldiers surrounded the building. "Surrender now." The commander emerged, hands raised. But as Richards approached to make the arrest, the man's hand darted to his belt. Richards reacted instantly, tackling him to the ground. A concealed pistol clattered across the pavement. "Nice try," Richards growled, pinning the commander. "But you're not getting off that easy. You've got intel we need." Back at the forward base, Richards conferred with his lieutenants. "We let him escape with a tracker. He'll lead us straight to the other cells." The plan worked perfectly. Over the following weeks, Richards' teams struck collaborator hideouts across a dozen worlds. Precision raids left the pro-Vulcan networks in tatters. The final stronghold loomed on Kepler 9. Richards' dropship touched down on the scorching desert world, kicking up clouds of red sand. He squinted against the glare of 3 suns. "Move out," he ordered. "That bunker's not going to take itself." Rebel infantry advanced under cover of sonic disruptors, neutralizing defensive positions. Richards led from the front as they breached the main doors. Alarms blared as they fought their way to the command center. "He's arming the defense grid," a soldier shouted. Richards sprinted down the corridor, shoulder-checking the bunker door. The collaborator leader spun, reaching for the activation switch. Richards' stun blast caught him square in the chest. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious but alive. "Target secure," Richards reported. "It's done." Returning to Earth, Richards marched his prisoners before Chancellor Bailey. The collaborator leaders stood in chains, defeated but defiant. Bailey's voice was cold as he pronounced judgment. "You will stand trial for your crimes against humanity. Let justice be done." As the prisoners were led away, Bailey turned to Richards. "Well done, old friend. Now we can focus on rebuilding. We've got a lot of work ahead." Chancellor Bailey leaned over the holographic display, his eyes fixed on the pulsing red dots representing Vulcan-held territories. The war room hummed with activity as analysts pored over intelligence reports. "Time to finish this," Bailey muttered. He tapped a series of commands, bringing up a roster of Rebel Special Forces teams. "Deploy Alpha through Echo to these coordinates. Priority targets are Titan, Gliese, Kepler, and Trappist." On Titan, the frozen methane winds howled as Rebel dropships screamed through the upper atmosphere. Commander Sarah Chen checked her chrono. 0200 local time. "Perfect." 30 seconds to insertion, the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. Chen's grip tightened on her pulse rifle. The dropship's bay doors hissed open. Chen and her team rappelled down into the inky titanian night. Their boots crunched on the icy surface as they fanned out, thermal optics revealing the sprawling Rourkeville refinery complex ahead. Vulcan sentries patrolled the perimeter, oblivious to the approaching threat. Chen signaled her squad. Silenced weapons coughed, dropping the guards without a sound. They breached the main gate, alarms blaring to life. Chen's team moved with ruthless efficiency, neutralizing resistance with precise bursts of gunfire. In the command center, the Vulcan garrison commander barked orders as his troops scrambled to repel the attack. A flashbang grenade sailed through the doorway, filling the room with searing light and sound. When the commander's vision cleared, he found himself staring down the barrel of Chen's rifle. "Order your men to stand down," she growled, "or this ends badly for you." With shaking hands, the commander activated the base-wide comms. "All units, cease fire and surrender to rebel forces." Across Titan, similar scenes played out as human forces seized control of vital infrastructure. Chen's team swept through refineries and mining complexes, securing them against potential sabotage. On Gliese, the uprising erupted with clockwork precision. Insurgent cells struck key targets throughout the capital as rebel aerospace fighters screamed overhead, their sonic booms shattering windows. Inside the Planetary Defense Control Center, a human technician who had spent years infiltrating the Vulcan hierarchy made his move. With a few keystrokes, he severed the connection to the orbital defense grid. Rebel dropships immediately punched through the atmosphere, disgorging waves of ground troops. The Vulcan garrison, caught off guard and cut off from reinforcements, crumbled within days. But not all worlds fell so easily. On Kepler, entrenched Vulcan forces dug in for a protracted siege. Rebel assaults met waves of plasma fire, leaving the streets littered with bodies from both sides. Bailey watched the casualty reports scroll across his screen, his eyes sharp. He opened a secure channel to Admiral Juarez. "Deploy the Third Fleet to Kepler. I want a show of force that will make those Vulcan bastards think twice about continuing this fight." Days later, the sky above Kepler filled with the hulking shapes of rebel capital ships. Vulcan holdouts gazed up in horror as hundreds of weapon emplacements locked onto their positions. "Attention Vulcan forces!" Juarez's voice boomed from every speaker and comm device. "You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, or face annihilation." One by one, Vulcan garrisons across Kepler lowered their weapons. The swift capitulation sent shockwaves through remaining pockets of resistance. On world after world, Vulcan troops laid down arms rather than face the wrath of the victorious human forces. Bailey turned his attention to the monumental task of establishing new colonial administrations. He paced his office, dictating instructions to his aide. "I'm appointing Governor Reyes to oversee Titan's transition. She has experience mediating between factions. She'll need it. The pre-invasion council members are already clamoring for their old positions back." As Bailey worked to stabilize the liberated colonies, squads of military police fanned out across human space. They rounded up former Vulcan officials and collaborators, filling hastily constructed detention centers. In a maximum security facility deep beneath the Martian surface, Solaris sat alone in his cell. The former Vulcan leader stared at the blank walls, cut off from all outside contact as he awaited judgment for his crimes against humanity. Chancellor Bailey stood at the viewport of his office on Sirius, watching as a convoy of prisoner transports descended through the planet's atmosphere. The sleek ships carried the architects of humanity's suffering, Solaris and his top Vulcan officials. Bailey turned to his aide. "It's time. Let's get this over with." The tribunal chamber buzzed with tense energy as Bailey took his seat. Holocameras whirred, broadcasting the proceedings across human space. Armed guards escorted Solaris into the room. The Vulcan's face remained impassive as he was led to the defendant's box. Chief Justice Amelia Chen gavelled the court to order. "We are gathered here to try Solaris, former leader of the Vulcan occupation, for crimes against humanity." As the trial unfolded, a parade of witnesses recounted the horrors inflicted upon humanity. Dr. Sarah Liang, her voice quavering, described the twisted medical experiments conducted on human prisoners. "They injected us with experimental compounds," she said, rolling up her sleeve to reveal a network of scars. Those who survived were subjected to invasive surgeries without anesthesia. Solaris sat stone-faced throughout her testimony. When it was his turn to speak, he stood tall, his voice dripping with contempt. "Everything I did was for the greater good of the Vulcan Empire," he declared. "Humanity needed a firm hand to guide it. Without our intervention, you would have destroyed yourselves." Murmurs of outrage rippled through the gallery. Bailey's hands clenched beneath the table. As the days wore on, more damning evidence came to light. Footage of Vulcan troops massacring civilians played on giant screens. Documents detailing the systematic exploitation of human labor camps were entered into evidence. Jack Richards took the stand, his face etched with grief as he recounted the day Vulcan forces stormed his home. "They dragged my wife and daughter into the street," he said, his voice breaking. "I begged them to stop, but they gunned them down right in front of me." The courtroom fell silent. Even the most hardened observers wiped away tears. As the scope of Vulcan atrocities became clear, voices among the human populace called for swift retribution. "Execute them all!" Angry mobs chanted outside the tribunal. Bailey addressed the public, urging calm. "We must not stoop to their level," he said. "Justice will be served, but we will do it the right way." His tenacity was tested when evidence emerged of rebel forces carrying out reprisal killings of Vulcan prisoners. Bailey ordered a full investigation, knowing it could implicate some of his closest allies. "We cannot have a double standard," he told his advisors. "All war crimes must be punished regardless of who committed them." The revelation sparked protests from pro-Vulcan sympathizers. "Amnesty for all," they cried. "It's the only way to move forward." Bailey rejected their demands outright. "There can be no true peace without accountability," he declared. As the trial neared its conclusion, disturbing testimony emerged about human collaborators. Former resistance fighter Elena Kovacs described witnessing her neighbor, James Harrington, personally overseeing a Vulcan death squad. "He pointed out which houses belonged to resistance members," she said, her voice filled with disgust. "I watched him laugh as they dragged entire families away." Harrington and other collaborators were added to the docket, facing the same rigorous legal process as their Vulcan masters. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the verdicts were read. Solaris and his inner circle received life sentences. Lesser officials were given lengthy prison terms based on their level of involvement. The human collaborators faced justice as well. Harrington and others who actively participated in atrocities received harsh sentences, though slightly reduced compared to their Vulcan counterparts. With the trials concluded, Bailey presented the Vulcan prisoners' fate to the newly elected human legislature. Heated debates erupted as various factions argued for execution or indefinite imprisonment. Bailey proposed a nuanced approach, offering conditional release and repatriation for those who assisted in liberating human worlds, while keeping unrepentant offenders imprisoned until they accepted responsibility for their actions. After hours of contentious discussion, the legislature ratified Bailey's proposal. As the vote was announced, Bailey gazed out at the assembled lawmakers. The long shadow of Vulcan occupation was lifting, but the work of rebuilding human civilization had only just begun. Chancellor Henry Bailey stepped off the transport shuttle onto the cracked tarmac of New Kaluga's spaceport. The acrid stench of industrial waste assaulted his nostrils. He surveyed the bleak landscape, once verdant fields now reduced to a toxic wasteland. "This way, sir," said Administrator Chen, leading Bailey towards a dilapidated agriplexes. "Watch your step." As they entered the cavernous facility, Bailey's eyes widened. Rusted machinery lay dormant, thick layers of grime coating every surface. A handful of emaciated workers shuffled about, their hollow eyes barely registering the visitors. "My God," Bailey whispered. "How many were forced to work here?" Chen's face hardened. Thousands at the peak of Vulcan production. Most didn't survive more than a few months. Bailey's fists clenched as he strode through the facility, taking in every detail of the Vulcan's cruel efficiency. In one corner, he spotted a pile of discarded worker uniforms, stained with blood and worse. "Enough," he growled. "We're going to fix this, all of it." Days later, Bailey stood before a gathering of human administrators and engineers on Cernan III. The dilithium mines loomed behind him, a stark reminder of centuries of exploitation. "We have an opportunity," Bailey declared, his voice echoing off the cavern walls. "To rebuild not just our infrastructure, but our very humanity. I'm authorizing unlimited funds for planetary rehabilitation. We'll transform these hellholes into beacons of progress." Cheers erupted from the assembled crowd. As they dispersed to begin their monumental task, Bailey pulled aside Dr. Alara Voss, a former resistance scientist. "I need you to open a dialogue with the Vulcan prisoners," he said quietly. "See if any are willing to share their technological expertise in exchange for leniency." Voss nodded grimly. "It won't be easy, but I'll do what I can." Weeks passed as Bailey crisscrossed human space, witnessing similar scenes of devastation on world after world. But slowly, change began to take root. On New Kaluga, Bailey watched as an army of environmental reclamation droids swarmed across the polluted fields. Their sensors pulsed, identifying and neutralizing toxins with ruthless efficiency. Inside the agriplex, human workers installed gleaming hydroponic systems. The air hummed with the sound of purifiers, scrubbing away centuries of contamination. "First harvest is expected within the month," reported Administrator Chen, beaming with pride. "We're already seeing microbial activity return to the soil." Bailey nodded approvingly. "Excellent work. Keep pushing forward." As he prepared to depart for his next inspection, a commotion erupted near the spaceport. A group of protesters had gathered, their faces contorted with anger. "No Vulcan tech," they chanted. "Human solutions only." Bailey approached the crowd, hands raised placatingly. "I understand your concerns," he said. "But we must use every tool at our disposal to rebuild. We can't let fear—" A rock whistled past his head. Bailey's security detail instantly formed a protective cordon around him. "Get the Chancellor to safety!" shouted the lead agent. As they rushed him towards the waiting shuttle, Bailey caught a glimpse of the protesters being forcibly dispersed. He sighed heavily, knowing the road ahead would not be easy. Months later, Bailey stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Prometheus city on Luna. The sprawling metropolis gleamed beneath the stars, a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. Dr. Voss approached, datapad in hand. "The first batch of Vulcan scientists have agreed to cooperate," she reported. "Their fusion technology alone could revolutionize our power grids within years." Bailey nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Good. But we mustn't lose sight of what truly matters. Have you seen the new cultural center?" They made their way to a vast, domed structure at the heart of the city. Inside, holographic displays showcased millennia of human art and scientific achievement. Children gathered around interactive exhibits, their eyes wide with wonder. "This," Bailey said softly, "this is how we truly defeat the Vulcans, by reclaiming who we are." As they exited the center, alarms blared across the city. Bailey's comm unit crackled to life. "Sir, we have reports of coordinated attacks on government buildings on Vega and Kepler. Separatist groups claiming responsibility." Bailey's expression resolute. "Deploy the rapid response teams. I want these threats neutralized immediately." He turned to Voss, his eyes blazing with intensity. "We've come too far to let a few extremists derail everything we've built. The Confederacy will stand regardless of the cost." The acrid stench of burning circuitry filled the air as former Chancellor Henry Bailey strode through the debris-strewn corridors of the Confederacy legislature. His boots crunched over shattered glass and twisted metal, remnants of the recent Vulcan attacks. Undeterred, he pushed open the heavy doors to the assembly chamber. Hundreds of faces turned to watch him approach the podium, their expressions a mix of fear, anger, and desperate hope. Bailey gripped the edges of the lectern, his knuckles tightening with tension. "For too long, we cowered in the shadow of Vulcan oppression," he began, his voice cutting through the silence. "They kept us caged within our own star systems, while the rest of the galaxy was carved up by alien powers." He paused, scanning the room. "But no more. We stand here today free from their yoke, and I say it's time we claimed our rightful place among the stars." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Bailey pressed on, his words gathering force like a storm. "Out there," he gestured to the viewport, "where pinpricks of starlight dotted the inky void, lie countless worlds untouched by Vulcan hands, virgin planets ripe for colonization. It is our destiny, no, our duty, to explore and settle these new frontiers." As he spoke, holographic displays flickered to life, showing breathtaking vistas of alien landscapes, azure oceans, crimson deserts, and lush emerald jungles. "Imagine it," Bailey continued, his eyes alight with passion. "Human colonies stretching to the galactic rim, our children and grandchildren breathing the air of new worlds, gazing up at unfamiliar constellations. This is the future I envision for humanity." The chamber erupted in applause. Bailey raised his hands, calling for quiet. "But this dream will not come easily. We must act boldly, decisively. I propose an ambitious program to construct a fleet of colony Arcs, massive, self-sustaining ships capable of supporting generations of settlers on their journey to the stars." He nodded to an aide, who activated another hologram. A massive vessel appeared, rotating slowly in the air. Its sleek hull bristled with weapons, while vast hydroponics bays and fusion reactors pulsed with energy. "These Arcs will be a testament to human ingenuity, incorporating the best of our technology with systems reclaimed from our former oppressors. They will carry the seeds of new civilizations to the farthest reaches of space." As the legislature debated and ultimately approved Bailey's proposal, a flurry of activity engulfed human space. Shipyards long dormant roared back to life. Engineers and construction crews worked around the clock, their labor illuminated by the constant flash of welding torches. Bailey stood with Jack Richards on an observation platform, watching as the skeletal frame of the first Arc took shape. "It's really happening," Richards marveled, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of construction. Bailey nodded, his expression grim. "Now comes the hard part. We need to find the right people to send." In the weeks that followed, Bailey and Richards oversaw a rigorous selection process. They combed through countless applications, seeking individuals with the skills and temperament needed to forge a new society on alien worlds. "We need more than just soldiers and scientists," Bailey insisted during one marathon vetting session. "Farmers, teachers, artists, the full spectrum of human experience." As the first Arc neared completion, Bailey delivered a series of impassioned speeches across human space. News broadcasts carried his words to every corner of the Confederacy. "The Icarus," he declared, standing before the gleaming hull of the massive ship, will carry the hopes and dreams of all humanity. Those who embark on this journey will face hardships we can scarcely imagine, but they go with the full support and admiration of those they leave behind. Thousands of colonist hopefuls stream towards the Icarus, their faces alight with excitement and trepidation. Families said tearful goodbyes, knowing they might never see each other again. The mood of celebration shattered in an instant. A series of explosions rocked the Icarus, sending plumes of acrid smoke billowing into the sky. Screams filled the air as panicked civilians fled the launch site. Bailey staggered to his feet, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. He watched in horror as fires raged along the Icarus's hull. The ship's primary reactor warning klaxons blared, their shrill cries cutting through the chaos. "Vulcan separatists!" Richards gasped, helping Bailey to his feet. "They must have planted bombs during construction." Bailey's face hardened. "Get me a secure line to Fleet Command. I want every suspected Vulcan enclave raided, now." As security forces swarmed across human space, making arrests and uncovering evidence of a wider insurrection, Bailey faced a difficult decision. The Icarus lay damaged, its reactor barely stabilized. Dozens of colonists and crew lay dead or wounded. "We have to postpone the launch," Richards urged. "The ship isn't safe." Bailey shook his head, his eyes blazing with defiance. "No, we launch as scheduled. To delay now would be to hand victory to those who seek to keep us chained to our past." He strode to where the surviving colonists huddled, shell-shocked and uncertain. "You came here ready to face the unknown," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "To brave the dangers of uncharted space. Will you let this act of cowardice stop you now?" A cheer went up from the crowd. Bailey nodded, a grim smile on his face. "Then let us show the galaxy the true strength of the human spirit." Days later, a somber crowd gathered for the Icarus's launch. Bailey stood at the podium, his face etched with lines of fatigue and grit. "Today, we take our first step into a larger universe," he intoned. "Those we lost will not be forgotten. Their sacrifice will light our way to the stars." With a roar that shook the earth, the Icarus's engines flared to life. Bailey watched as the massive ship rose into the sky, carrying with it the dreams of a reborn humanity. As the Ark vanished from view, Bailey turned to address the assembled dignitaries and media. "Let this serve as a warning," he declared, his voice hard as steel. "Any further attacks on our colonial efforts will be met with the full might of the human armada. We will not be denied our destiny." With those final words, the grizzled warrior turned and walked away from the launch site. He had done his part. Now it fell to Richards and the next generation to...
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.